Okay, my name is Carol Kioko. I am a Kenyan filmmaker, a producer and director based in South Africa.
And you're responsible for a co-production forum between Kenya and South Africa.
Yes.
What projects are you working on under that?
So I am part of almost like a collective of African independent producers who've come together to do Africa to Africa co-productions. And in that we have a slate of 5 films we do every year. And I am doing 2 features with 2 Kenyans, one who's based in South Africa and one who's based in Nairobi. And we're hoping to have those produced in the next year.
And what's the stories quickly in each of those?
So one is a sports film that looks at a team that's struggling to make it in the league here in South Africa, and the coach does something unconventional and reaches out to Kenya to get a player to join his team in the hope that they can win the league. The other is a story about a single mother who's lived in South Africa all her life in post-apartheid South Africa, and she suddenly has to leave the country because all the foreigners are being kicked out, but she doesn't want to leave. So she has to choose between staying in the place she calls home or returning to a place she doesn't identify with or recognize anymore.
And you, as a filmmaker yourself, you've got 2 projects, a short and a feature that's sort of in long-term development.
Yes, I for a long time have been working with filmmakers, and I ran the 48-hour film project, and I got to a place where I was like, okay, I want to do something for myself. And so I have a short film that's going into pre-production that's about a young South African woman who's independent and living in Joburg, living the life, but she's hit by tragedy when she loses a child she wasn't expecting to have. And suddenly she has to identify who she is and ask herself hard questions about what it means to be a woman and what it means to even define life without having a husband or having a child. And the feature film is actually a Kenyan story, which is inspired by the all-women villages in northern Kenya in the Samburu area, about these women who've been ostracized because they were either raped or they rejected the female genital mutilation, or they ended up in early pregnancy without husbands. So it's a coming-of-age story about a woman who does end up getting raped by a British soldier, and now she has to restart life because her family has ostracized her.
It's a particularly historic story, isn't it? Because the British have a large chunk of northern Kenya for army exercises.
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, no one's ever told that story. It's quite sticky because we make money from that. We make money from the Brits using our land. But the unfortunate thing is, because the Samburu are such a small community, they're about 300,000 people, no one knows that these women have no support at all. And the moment you, as a Samburu woman, choose not to have a husband, you're not considered a person. So you don't have any privileges whatsoever. And if you have cattle, if you found a way to make a livelihood, they can come and steal your cattle, which happens very often. And so you wake up and suddenly you don't know what to do with your life. And they're not farmers, so they can't decide to go plant some spinach or something. So they're in a very interesting dynamic where nobody speaks to them. But as women in this generation, I think that's a story that needs to be told, because they found a way to survive on their own. Like no men are allowed on these villages, so they just fend for themselves. So I think even if it's a timepiece, it will relate to a lot of conversations that are going on now, not just locally but also internationally, about the identity of women.
And these issues around the identity of women and the issues faced by women in Africa are beginning to be told.
Yes, and I think that's also because now women are in that space. I think before, even when I started working in the TV industry here in South Africa, there are very few black females who are in leadership positions of producers or directors. And even when you're in those positions, there's still another person who you kind of have to answer to. And so to finally be in a space, especially in Africa, where we have the opportunities to say what we want without anyone dictating it, is just phenomenal. And I think to be able to let that travel and not just say it to ourselves and say to the world, this is who we actually are, it's a very exciting time to be in that space. It's going to take a while. I'm not saying it's a done deal, because I still think it's a bit of a struggle because there's such a small percentage of us. But we're getting there, slowly and surely.